True Home Alone Nightmares. Story 1. The Silent Whisperer. It was the first time in months that I had the entire house to myself. My parents were away on a weekend getaway, and my siblings had their own plans. I had been anticipating this moment for weeks. A few quiet days to myself, free from the usual noise and chaos of daily life, were exactly what I needed. The promise of peace and solitude felt like a sweet relief from the grind of work and social obligations. Little did I know, the weekend I had been looking forward to would soon turn into one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. The evening started off innocently enough. I sank into the couch, remote in hand, and spent the night binge-watching Netflix shows I had been meaning to catch up on. Snacks littered the coffee table, and I lost track of time as I scrolled through my phone, aimlessly flipping through social media. By the time I decided it was finally time to go to bed, the clock had already struck midnight. I felt my eyelids growing heavy, the promise of sleep beckoning me as I stood up and stretched. The house was unusually quiet. Too quiet, if I'm being honest. The kind of silence that hangs thick in the air, making you feel like you're being watched. I tried to shake off the uncomfortable feeling as I made my way down the long, dark hallway to my bedroom. The light from the street lamp outside filtered in through the windows, casting long shadows on the walls. The house felt colder than usual, and I couldn't ignore the shiver running down my spine. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I closed the door behind me and crawled into bed, pulling the covers tightly around me. My mind, however, refused to quiet. The worries about work and other obligations crept back in, and I began replaying the events of the week in my head. The soft hum of the fridge downstairs, the gentle rustling of the leaves outside. Everything seemed to blend into the background as I slowly drifted off to sleep. But then, just as my thoughts began to fade, I heard it, a whisper. It was so soft, so faint, that I almost convinced myself it was just my imagination. But as I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, I heard it again, a breathy, almost inaudible voice coming from the corner of my room. It sounded like a faint whisper, barely perceptible, but there. Help me. My heart skipped a beat. I froze. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the wind was rattling the windows, or maybe it was just the house settling. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The whisper came again, louder this time. Help me. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe it was some noise from outside or the sound of an old pipe creaking. But then the whisper shifted. It wasn't just a faint voice anymore. It became a low, guttural sound, like something, or someone, was trying to communicate with me from the depths of the darkness. I felt a tight knot form in my stomach as the voice began to distort, and it almost sounded like it was calling my name. Sarah. I didn't know how to react. My mind raced, but my body stayed frozen. I wasn't sure if I should stay in bed, ignoring it, or get up and check the room. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that it drowned out the sound of anything else. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and texted my best friend in a panic. My hands were shaking as I typed, hoping it was just a bad case of nerves. Hey, I think I'm hearing things. Can you call me? The seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I stared at my phone, waiting for the reply, but the room grew colder still, the air thick with tension. The whispering stopped for a moment, and I almost thought maybe it was over. But then, just as I thought I was imagining it, the voice came back. This time, not a whisper, but a low, breathy chant, almost like it was coming from inside the walls. Sarah, Help me. Sarah. I could feel my pulse quicken. Panic started to take hold of me. I felt like I was suffocating. Something wasn't right. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I bolted out of bed, my heart racing in my chest as I stumbled across the room. I flicked on the lights, the sudden brightness doing little to calm my nerves. I checked every corner of the room, looking under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing. The room was empty, just like I had left it. Still, that feeling lingered. I stood there in the center of the room, my breath shallow, my thoughts scattered. I checked my phone again. No message from my friend. I felt a surge of frustration. This wasn't happening. I was imagining things. The whispering had to be some figment of my overactive mind. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew I couldn't just ignore it. The darkness felt oppressive now, thick with an unseen presence. I grabbed the lamp beside my bed, holding it in my hand like a weapon, and walked into the hallway. The house was silent again, eerily so. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the sound of the wind rattling the windows, it all seemed amplified now, like the quiet had been turned up to an unbearable level. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet echoed through the house. I took a few cautious steps down the hallway, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Was it possible someone had broken in? My parents' room was locked. My siblings' rooms were empty. The house was still. But as I reached the living room, something caught my eye. The door to the back porch was slightly ajar. The breeze had blown it open. I knew I had closed it earlier when I checked the house before going to bed. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I rushed toward the door, but as I approached, the cold air from outside swept into the room, sending a chill through my bones. Something was wrong. Suddenly, I heard it again, this time louder. The whispering was now more urgent, more distinct. It wasn't just the voice from the corner of my room anymore. This time, it seemed to come from all around me. Sarah, I'm right here. Help me. Please. The voice seemed to be coming from the back porch, just beyond the open door. I froze, unable to move. My entire body felt heavy, as if the fear had a physical weight. I stood there, staring into the night, heart pounding, unable to make a sound. Without thinking, I rushed to the door and slammed it shut. The whispering immediately stopped. Silence enveloped the house again, but it was different this time. Thick, suffocating. I turned around to face the hallway, only to be met with an overwhelming sense of dread. I wasn't alone. I knew that now. I barely slept that night. The whispers didn't return, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the house had been inhabited by something else, something that wasn't visible but was there, just beyond the edges of my perception. Every night since that night, I hear the whispers. They're faint at first, just a breath in the dark, but I know it's coming. Whatever it is, it's still waiting, and I know I won't be able to escape it. Story 2, The Shadow in the Backyard. I thought I knew my house better than anyone. I had lived there for years, watched the trees in the backyard grow, memorized every creak and groan the old house made at night. There had never been anything out of the ordinary, no strange occurrences, no unexplained noises. But when my family went on a 2-week vacation, I was left to fend for myself. At first, it seemed like a welcome break, a chance to enjoy some peace and quiet, free from the hustle and bustle of family life. Little did I know that freedom would come at a price. The first few days were blissfully uneventful. I spent most of my time working from home, enjoying the solitude. Even the nights felt peaceful. But it was the 4th evening that would change everything. It was a warm summer evening, the kind where the air is thick with humidity and the setting sun casts a golden glow across everything. I was sitting on the back porch, my feet propped up on the railing, a cold drink in hand. The backyard, usually a tranquil place, was quiet, save for the rustling of the leaves in the trees and the occasional chirp of a bird. It felt like everything in the world was at peace, but as I glanced up from my phone, something caught my eye. A shadow, just a blur really, moved quickly behind the trees near the far corner of the fence. It was so quick that I thought I might have imagined it. After all, the trees were dense, and it could have been an animal, a raccoon maybe, or a squirrel. But there was something about the movement that made me pause. I blinked, trying to shake the odd feeling creeping up my spine. There was no reason to be worried, but I couldn't shake the nagging sense that something wasn't right. The shadow hadn't moved like an animal. It was too deliberate, too precise. I took a deep breath and decided to ignore it. It was probably just a trick of the light, or the wind moving the branches. But then the shadow reappeared. It was larger this time, moving unnaturally fast, darting from one side of the yard to the other in a way that didn't make sense. I stood up instinctively, my heart pounding. Something wasn't right. No animal I knew could move that quickly, and certainly not in such a direct, purposeful way. My stomach churned with unease as I stared at the spot where I had seen the shadow, waiting for it to move again. As soon as I stood, the shadow stopped, dead, still. For a moment, everything was frozen. I stood there, locked in place, staring into the darkening backyard. The shadows from the trees stretched long across the grass, and yet there was no sign of movement. I couldn't explain it, but the shadow was still there. It felt as though it was waiting, watching me. The air around me seemed to thicken, and every instinct screamed for me to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. It was as if I was being drawn into its presence. The minutes dragged on. My pulse thudded in my ears. The yard was still, too still. The rustling of the leaves had stopped. The birds had fallen silent. There was nothing but that feeling of being watched. I could almost hear it, the silence itself ringing in my ears, pressing against me. Then, without warning, the shadow moved again, but this time it wasn't where it had been before. It was closer, too close. Panic surged through me as the shadow shifted toward the porch. My breath caught in my throat. It felt as though it was coming for me, as though the very darkness had come to life. I stumbled backward, tripping over the chair I had been sitting in, and in that moment, I knew something was wrong. This was not just some animal or a trick of the light. There was something in my backyard, something that shouldn't be there. I ran inside, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I locked it, then double-checked the windows. I could feel my heart pounding, and it felt as though the walls of the house were closing in around me. The shadow, whatever it was, had been watching me. I had no idea who or what it was, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. I stayed up the rest of the night, too terrified to even go near the back door. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a person? A stranger who had slipped into my yard? Or something worse? I couldn't bring myself to think about it for too long. The longer I stayed in the house, the more I felt like something else was in here with me. Something unseen, something waiting. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been nothing, that I had overreacted. Maybe it had been the wind, or a trick of the light after all. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't true. I had seen it. I had felt it. I decided to check the security cameras around the house, hoping that some rational explanation would present itself. I watched the footage from the backyard, my eyes glued to the screen. At first, I saw nothing out of the ordinary, just the calm, quiet backyard. But as I fast-forwarded to the time I had been sitting on the porch, my stomach dropped. There it was, a shadow creeping along the fence, moving unnaturally fast. It was unmistakable. It wasn't just the wind or a trick of the light. It was something, someone. But when I scanned the footage further, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The shadow didn't just appear in the footage at the moment I had seen it. It had been there for hours, moving quietly around the yard, stopping at certain points, as if it had been waiting for me, as if it knew I was there. I froze, staring at the screen. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. Who had been in my yard? How long had they been there? Why hadn't I noticed before? In a panic, I ran outside to check the yard. The grass was undisturbed, no footprints, no sign of anyone having been there. But as I walked closer to the fence, something caught my eye. A small, folded piece of paper tucked into the corner of the yard. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly bent down to pick it up. It was a note, scrawled in messy handwriting. "I'm waiting. You can't hide forever." I dropped the note, my heart racing. I looked around the yard once more, but there was nothing. The quiet stillness of the morning felt suffocating. Someone had been watching me. Someone had been waiting for me. I never went out into the backyard alone after that day. I kept the lights on at night, and I never felt safe in my own home again. The shadow, whatever it was, still lingers in my mind, its presence never fully gone. The note, the words, still echo in my thoughts. "I'm waiting. You can't hide forever." And I know, deep down, that whatever it was, it's still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. Story 3. The Uninvited Guest. It was supposed to be just another typical Saturday night, the kind where I had the house all to myself, the weekend ahead to unwind and relax. After a long and exhausting week, I couldn't wait to pour myself a glass of wine, curl up on the couch, and binge-watch my favorite TV shows, letting the world slip away for a few hours. The plan was simple: to be completely alone, with nothing to worry about except how many episodes I could get through before I fell asleep. But as the night stretched on, something unexpected happened that would change everything. It began innocuously enough, with me settling into the couch, the soft glow of the TV illuminating the room. The wine sat beside me, its red color almost inviting me to relax further. I was already a few glasses in, the alcohol working its magic on my tired mind. The house was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards as the house settled into the coolness of the night. Everything felt safe, familiar. Then I heard it. A faint sound at first. A soft creak. I paused, listening carefully. It was the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. My first instinct was to ignore it. The wind sometimes made the door shift slightly, or maybe I had left it unlocked when I came inside earlier. It was probably nothing, I told myself. But then, there were footsteps. Slow, deliberate. The kind of footsteps that you don't hear often. But when you do, you know something is wrong. Someone was walking inside my house. My heart skipped a beat, and a cold chill ran down my spine. I sat up straight, straining my ears to hear more clearly. The footsteps were getting closer, nearing the living room. I quickly stood up, my legs shaky, as adrenaline surged through me. I glanced around the room, my thoughts racing. There was no way anyone should be here. No one was supposed to be inside. I hadn't invited anyone over, and I certainly hadn't heard the door open before. My heart was pounding, the sound of it almost deafening. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend, desperate for any sign of reassurance. I needed someone to call me, to make sure I wasn't imagining things. I could feel my palms sweating, the phone trembling in my grip. The footsteps grew louder. They were unmistakable now, echoing through the quiet of the house. Whoever was out there was walking deliberately, getting closer and closer, their weight pressing into the old wooden floorboards. I could almost hear the floor creaking under their steps. The sound sent a jolt of panic through me. I was frozen, not sure whether to hide or confront whatever was happening. What if it was a burglar, a thief, a stranger who had somehow gotten in? Before I could move, the door to the living room opened. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall and thin, disheveled, with wild, unkempt hair and a ragged, dirt-streaked jacket. His appearance was completely out of place. His eyes were cold, unreadable, and fixed directly on me. There was nothing about him that made me think he was harmless. In fact, everything about his presence screamed danger. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, time seemed to stop. My mind raced to process what was happening, but it was too late. I screamed. The sound tore through the quiet house, but it felt hollow, like the walls were swallowing my voice. My body went into overdrive, instinct taking over. I didn't look back as I bolted toward the back door, my feet pounding against the floor. My heart was a drumbeat in my chest, too loud to ignore. I yanked open the door and ran into the cold night, not even pausing to consider what I was doing. I just needed to get out. I heard the man's footsteps behind me, following me, growing closer, but I didn't dare look back. My legs burned with effort, but I kept running, faster, harder, until I reached the neighbor's house. I pounded on their door, gasping for breath, almost incoherent in my panic. My neighbor let me inside, and I collapsed onto the couch, my mind spinning with terror. The police arrived not long after, and they took my statement, but I could tell from their expressions that they didn't believe me. They combed through the house, room by room, but found nothing. No signs of a break-in, no doors left ajar, no fingerprints. It was like the man had never been there at all. I couldn't understand it. He had been there. I had seen him, heard him, felt his presence. They said there was nothing they could do. They told me that it was likely just a misunderstanding, maybe someone who had gotten the wrong house. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. This wasn't a random mistake. The fear that had gripped me was real. The man I had seen was real. I tried to convince myself that I had just been scared, that maybe I had imagined it all. But the image of his eyes, so cold and lifeless, haunted me. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere, waiting for me. The sense of being watched never left. The next day, I went back to the house. Cautiously, I checked the locks on every door and window. I searched the house for any clues, anything that could explain what had happened. But there was nothing. No trace of the man. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. I tried to convince myself that he was a figment of my imagination, but I knew the truth. The terror I had felt that night had been too real, too overwhelming. A few days later, as I was going through some old boxes in the attic, I came across something strange. A small, weathered photo album. I hadn't seen it in years. As I flipped through the pages, a familiar face stopped me cold. The man from the living room, the one I had seen that night, was in one of the photos. He was standing with my father, smiling, with his arm around him. I didn't recognize him, but I was sure it was the same man. The photo had been taken years ago, before I was even born. My hands shook as I flipped the pages faster, my heart racing. The next few pages showed more pictures of him, scattered through various family events. How had he been in my house? Why was he there? And why didn't I recognize him? The answers didn't come, but the fear was back. The man in the photo looked eerily the same as he had that night, just as wild, just as unhinged. The only difference was that in the photo he was smiling, a friendly, inviting smile. In person, he hadn't smiled at all. It was then that I realized something chilling. This man wasn't just a stranger. He was someone who had been a part of my life long before that night, someone whose presence had always been lurking, just out of sight. And now, for reasons I couldn't understand, he had come back into my life. His appearance was no accident. The door had been opened for him, whether I knew it or not. I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen if I did. I moved out the very next week, and though I haven't been back since, the fear still lingers. I don't know who that man really was, or why he came to my house, but I will never forget the cold, unreadable look in his eyes as he stood in the doorway that night. The worst part, I still don't feel safe. I can still hear those footsteps, and sometimes I feel like he's still out there, waiting for me to come back. As I reflect on that terrifying night, the events that unfolded in my house have lingered in my mind, haunting me with their implications. The uninvited guest, the cold and unreadable eyes, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. They were not just a series of isolated, horrifying events. No, they served as a reminder of something much larger, something that transcended the walls of my home and pierced into the fabric of my understanding of the world. Sometimes, the things that frighten us the most are not the ones we can immediately explain, but those that shake the very foundation of our sense of safety and control. There is a lesson to be learned from what happened that night. It is a lesson that applies not just to moments of fear or terror, but to all the challenges we face in life. Fear, as much as we dread it, often has a way of uncovering truths about ourselves and the world around us. It forces us to confront the things we would rather ignore, the things we hope will stay hidden in the shadows. And sometimes, the monsters we face are not always the ones outside, but the ones within, the doubts, the insecurities, the unspoken fears that we bury deep inside. In that moment, when the man appeared in my living room, I wasn't just facing an intruder. I was facing my own vulnerability. I was reminded that no matter how safe and secure we think we are, there will always be moments in life that make us feel exposed, out of control, and unsure of what's real and what's not. Life, like that night, can throw the unexpected at us when we least expect it. And often, it's not the external forces that will defeat us, but our own ability to stay grounded in the face of fear. But there is strength to be found in fear if we know how to use it. It can be a tool, a guiding force that propels us forward, that teaches us to trust our instincts, to remain vigilant, and to never take our safety or well-being for granted. The experience taught me that the real strength lies not in avoiding fear, but in acknowledging it and facing it head-on. It's easy to run away from the unknown, to shut our eyes and pretend it doesn't exist. But true courage is found in taking that first step, even when the path ahead is unclear. That night, I didn't know who that man was or why he was there, and I still don't have all the answers. But I have learned something more valuable than any explanation could offer: the importance of trust, not just in others, but in myself. Trusting my instincts, trusting my ability to react when faced with the unknown. I learned that I can't always control what happens to me, but I can control how I respond. The message of this experience is simple, yet profound. We are stronger than we realize, especially when faced with the unexpected. The shadows that lurk in our lives, whether they are fears, uncertainties, or dangers, are not invincible. They are only as powerful as we allow them to be. And when we find the courage to confront them, to step into the unknown, we learn more about ourselves and the world than we ever could by simply running away. So, let this be a reminder that we are not helpless in the face of fear. We have the strength to fight back, to take control of our own narrative. We are capable of surviving the scariest of nights, of walking through the darkness with our heads held high and emerging stronger than we were before. Life will always throw challenges our way, and sometimes those challenges will take us by surprise. But with each challenge comes the opportunity to grow, to learn, and to rise above the fear. In the end, the most terrifying thing about that night wasn't the man who showed up at my door. It was the realization that fear, in all its forms, can be a catalyst for change, for self-discovery, and for growth. And the only way to truly conquer it is to embrace it, face it head on, and use it as a stepping stone to become the person we were always meant to be. Fear doesn't define us. It's how we respond to it that shapes our journey.